Hello everyone and welcome back to the Mauve Coaching Podcast. This is episode 2 of season 2, 2 being a very significant number in my life as we know, so I'm living for this. And on this pod, as you know, we talk all things health and fitness, career chats, travelling, emotional, mental well-being, just life in general, the good, the bad, the ugly and absolutely everything in between. So with that in mind, today's topic I thought was very fitting considering the time of year at least that I'm recording this, which is actually January 19th, which statistically is actually a very significant date in the calendar in terms of motivation. So I thought no time better than the present to talk about goals, how to set them, and motivation, which has been a very topical discussion that I've been having with all of my clients, both old and new. So I thought no better time, as I said, than the present to talk about it, how to go about goal setting, and what we should potentially be looking at as our sources of motivation, and when all else fails, what to rely on. Okay, so without further ado, let's get stuck in. So let's look at goal setting, both for 2023 and beyond. Okay, so 90 days and beyond even, okay, thinking shorter to medium term initially, and big picture, longer term. What, who, and where do you want to be? 90 days from now, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. These are all really important questions to be asking yourself because as humans, right, we are very goal-oriented beings. We need to have goals in order to strive towards something. Otherwise, we're literally aimlessly approaching life and we won't really achieve anything, or if we are, we won't necessarily know we have, because if we haven't set goals, how do we know we're making progress in any regard? Because we're not tracking them, we're not measuring them, we're not reassessing with ourselves on a weekly, monthly basis, however frequently that might be for you. And you might think to yourself that that's not a value of yours, that you don't necessarily want to be held accountable to goals, and that's just bullshit, okay? And more often than not, the reason that people don't set goals isn't because they don't find them helpful or meaningful. It's largely because we find it overwhelming, okay? It's actually terrifying if you think about it. We are literally setting the conditions for failure or for success, okay? That's the bottom line. That's what goal setting entails. You are literally setting yourself up to compare yourself in X number of days to your old version of yourself, currently making the goals in the present moment, to your future self, and hoping that if you put all the measures in place, you will have progressed to that expected state, to that expected future self. And I get it. As I said, it's terrifying. But what's more terrifying is staying stagnant, is not actually doing anything with this precious life that you have, not feeling at the very least at peace with yourself, content with where you're going, because as I said, we are goal-oriented. It is in our nature to be working towards something. If we don't have goals set, we won't feel good in ourselves. We won't be working towards improving whatever aspect of our life that goal is focused on. And at the end of the day, that's what life's all about, okay? It's about constantly evolving in whatever way that might mean for you. That's not necessarily to do with career for everyone. That's not necessarily always a value that an individual holds. It's not necessarily always to do with appearance for a lot of people. Like, everyone's goals are stemming from unique sources, and that's what we're going to get into now as well. But one thing to note, and that I found really interesting, is that around, I think it was December 27th. Yeah, no, actually it was later than that. December 30th, actually. So it was the day before New Year's Eve. And this is when I was like just recovering semi from my Bali experience. So I was pretty much not in any position to be making goals myself. So I put that on the long finger because I was like, I don't want to be making goals when I'm in this headspace, when I'm physically, like, I hadn't eaten basically for 10 days. Not basically, hadn't drank water for that long either. I was basically like a shriveled up version of myself, not my best self at all. So I was in no headspace to be setting ambitious goals. Like, I had no clarity, like I couldn't really focus enough to even come on my story, which is quite funny looking back in that video. To come to reference in this podcast, I had to look back on that video and I could barely put 2 words together because I had no food or water in me. So obviously my brain couldn't function. And on that story, where I'm talking gobbledygook, because as I said, brain, no compute, I ask, have you set goals yet for 2023 and beyond? Okay, and this got a lot of engagement, and it's really interesting for me when I pop up things like that to notice what gets kind of more traction, engagement from my followers, because it's really important to me to know what you guys are struggling with and where I potentially can help. Okay, and that's actually what inspired this podcast, because I know I firsthand was struggling with setting goals, as I said, because the headspace I was in, I was feeling so low, mentally, physically, emotionally, at my lowest, like literal rock bottom. Not rock bottom compared to last year when I was literally in the dumps, like we talked about before, but rock bottom in the sense that I was also abroad for Christmas. There are a couple of things in my personal life that were kind of just going all over the gaff. And to top it all off, I was also physically unwell. Okay, so mentally I was also unwell, and emotionally a little bit more irritable. Okay, because of that, I was, as I said, in no mind to be setting goals. So I popped it up in my story to see if anyone else was in the same boat, if anyone else was feeling like this inordinate amount of pressure, because of the narrative on social media at the time was like all built around 2023, new year, new me. And I in no way want to ever add to that pressure or stress that you guys feel, because I know what I feel even when I'm scrolling on my own freaking Instagram feed. I'm literally looking through it and I'm like, okay, I can literally feel my cortisol spiking. I am anxious. I want to turn my phone off and never look at it again, because it's all about feeding in. And this is something that I don't want to do, and I want to hold myself to, is that I never want to feed into your anxieties. I never want to feed in or target your pain points, essentially, is what they are, like what you're currently stressing about or struggling with, in a way that makes you feel bad about yourself. I don't want to shame you into feeling like you have to change something, okay? That's not who I am. Therefore, that's not what my business is about. That's not what my page is about, okay? That's not what this podcast is about. I want to inspire you from a good place to do better for yourself and for no one else, okay? Not what your mom wants, not what your boyfriend wants, not what society wants for you, for yourself. And when I put that on my story, I think it was, as I said, it was December 30th, and only 48%. Hold on, let me get the stats up. Yeah, so it was 52% said they had made goals for 2023 and beyond, and 48% hadn't. Okay, so literally basically half and half, had and hadn't made goals. And it was really interesting to me. Firstly, it helped alleviate my freaking anxiety and feeling that I was like way behind, like especially as I spoke about before, like I'm a very productive individual, okay, but that for me is sometimes a coping mechanism to deal with my anxiety, to feel like I'm being proactive about, making positive change in my life, to not feel like I'm just sitting back and letting my life explode in front of me. I'm actually wanting to be proactive about it, okay? That time of year especially, I actually spoke about on my Instagram in the post prior to this one that I'm about to talk about now. That time of year isn't meant for, let's go, new year, new me, like let's hit the ground running January 1st, like never look back. Once the clock strikes fucking midnight, January 1st, I am transformed. I am my best self. Like, no, that's not fucking realistic. And you're essentially setting yourself up to fail. And that time of year, 26th to like 31st, even onwards, past January 1st, okay? January 1st to like January freaking 15th can be whatever the fuck you want it to be, firstly, because time is all but an illusion. At fucking end of the day, this is what pisses me off about the arbitrary nature of our freaking calendar, okay? It's like Monday. Everyone has this concept or this idea in their head that they have to like wait till Monday to start. And this is actually how I used to program my clients. But going forward, I'm changing that. I want to set them up to start on whatever day the first of the month falls, or whatever day or date that we agree on, because we shouldn't be putting this inordinate amount of pressure on ourselves to transform, as I said, at midnight. We're not freaking Cinderella, okay? That's not like how it works. It's not like Monday, new week, new me, January 1st, new year, new me. That's not how it works. And that time of year, I think, is really important to wind down, to be still, to be reflective, to rest and digest, like quite literally, right? When I say rest and digest, by the way, I'm talking about your parasympathetic nervous system, which essentially means when you're not in fight or flight mode, so you're in a regulated state. But it's also quite fitting because we've just eaten, Christmas dinner. You want to rest and digest after that, okay? I thought it was quite funny putting that on my Instagram, I have to say. Dad joke. But when I put that on my story, going back to that, I felt this massive relief, being like, geez, grand, okay, cool. Everyone else is kind of on the same boat as me. Like, half of them obviously are proactive, half of them are also kind of like, no, let's use this time to reflect, or no, let's use this time to be with my family, or just simply be. Right, we never let ourselves just be. And that's like, I'm speaking to myself right now. Sometimes when I say to you guys and what I say to my clients, I'm also saying to myself, because this week, for example, it's been hectic. Like, I haven't even made time. I'm not going to say I haven't had time, because I should have made time. I haven't made time for what I'd usually incorporate into my morning routine. So like my journaling and my reading, because I've just been chaotically busy, okay? And that's not a bad thing. I love it. I love being busy. But we don't oftentimes make time just to literally not be on our phones, not striving for success in the future version of me, just simply being, okay? And as I said on my Instagram, oftentimes we aren't in alignment with this arbitrary calendar, this yearly calendar, right? These 365 days, January 1st being the first, December 31st being 365th day. We don't have to necessarily align our transformation or our goals around those days or those dates. They can very much be, firstly, start on Wednesday, start mid-February, start whenever the fuck you want to start, okay? Because we're not all in alignment with those calendars, okay? Sometimes our physical energy cycles, which is what Eckhart Tolle talks about in his Power of Now book, which I actually finally finished, and it was freaking amazing. Read it if you haven't. It's so powerful. It's transformed my life. And I know that sounds cliche, but it has. He talks about how our physical energy cycles aren't necessarily always in alignment with the calendar year, okay? Some of us might have gone through a lot, okay? Whatever that might entail, okay? That was me January, February, March, April, May, June last year. Okay, I was in a phase of disintegration, and that is what he talks about in his book. So phase of disintegration is essentially making room for new opportunities, for this new version of yourself to come to fruition. So it's like what one of my clients said to me yesterday on our check-in call, and I loved it. It's the phase in between when you are a caterpillar and you're a butterfly. What is that called? Chrysalis. Okay, that was such an ugly laugh. Chrysalis is the phase she was talking about. And that, for me, is what the phase that I was in. So before January to, like, say, March, April, up until May, actually, I'd say I was in my disintegration phase. I was in my caterpillar phase, okay? And the chrysalis phase for me was very much June, July, August, September. My butterfly phase has been ever since, which is why I actually think I'm going to get a tattoo inspired by that. I think I've spoken about that before. So we're all in different phases, okay? Some people are in their caterpillar phase, the phase of their disintegration, the phase when they might be going back to the basics, stripping back their lives and unraveling it, or letting it unravel in front of them and just accepting it and not resisting that and being okay with that, okay? We're not all meant to be constantly growing, that you can't always be in a growth phase, okay? Some phases are for disintegration, are for like dissolution. Other people, however, might have been in a position around that time of year, maybe the people who set those goals, that they're ready for growth. They're on the cusp of a period of growth. They're ready to rumble. They're like, no, I've had that shit time last year. I kind of let myself process it and I'm ready to make positive change. Whatever phase you're in, though, you should have goals. And that's what I want to come back to. Is like, your goals don't always have to be like, get fit in the gym or like whatever it may be, okay? Just because I'm a PT doesn't necessarily mean all my goals revolve around health and fitness. It's actually the opposite of that. My mental well-being, my emotional well-being, because as I said before, my approach to coaching is very holistic, okay? It's not just looking at physique goals, body comp. It's also looking at your lifestyle, your life as a whole. And you don't necessarily always have to have like, okay, this year I'm going to get my dream job, I'm going to get the promotion, whatever it is. it can very much be, if you're in the phase of disintegration, this year I'm going to prioritize me. I'm going to prioritize my health. And in order to prioritize my health, that will mean prioritizing myself, setting time aside in my mornings, my evenings, throughout the day for timeouts, for breath work, for mindfulness, for meditation, for yoga, for things that I enjoy, for walks on the beach with my friends or on my own, listening to a podcast, like whatever it may be. It's still a goal, okay? Just because one goal is more maybe ambitious to one person than it is to another doesn't mean they're any less valuable or admirable. It's very much to do with where you're at in your own life. So that's one thing I would say is, firstly, meet yourself where you are. So on that note, if you haven't made goals or New Year resolutions, which send me, don't like the word resolutions, okay? Or New Year and those words together, because as I said, shouldn't necessarily have to align with the calendar year. But besides the point, if you haven't made them yet, don't stress, don't fret. Time is but an illusion. Set them when you're ready to set them. You can set them now. This is probably going to be aired in February. Set them now, okay? Set them whenever the fuck you are in the headspace to be setting them. You want them to be meaningful to you. You want them to be well thought out. You want to have thought about it, deliberated it on enough time that you are certain that they are what you want in your life. They are what you want to work towards. Because if your goals are just made like airy-fairy, like on a random Wednesday night, like when you're barely thinking twice, you give yourself 5 minutes to bash out some goals, just to tick the box exercise, like they're not going to be clearly something you've thought about much. And therefore, you're not going to really follow through with them. If you haven't deliberated them on for some time, you're not necessarily certain about them. And you want them to be like I was chatting to my friend about this just yesterday, and she was like, what are your goals? And I was like, I named off a few because I had them off the top of my head because I knew they were the ones like deeply meaningful to me. But I had more, okay? And the ones that I necessarily wasn't as passionate about, or they weren't as aligned with me and my values, they're the ones that I actually kind of forgot about and hadn't even been making stride towards achieving. But the ones that I really value are the ones that like I make time for every day, every week, whatever it may be, to work towards them, because they're in my subconscious. They're going to be at the back of my mind in every decision that I make. It's not like a conscious decision sometimes. Like I don't consciously think, okay, I have to train this week. It's actually just part of my weekly routine now, because I value health. I value my performance goals in the gym. I value my strength. I value my well-being. I value how it makes me feel. Like it's a non-negotiable for me. So they just kind of become second nature to you, okay? And that's what ideally your most important goals are. They shouldn't be something that you have to remind yourself about. They should kind of be integrated into your life, into daily or weekly habits, and be a part of your lifestyle that you're constantly working towards achieving. Next up, I want to make a distinction between goals and dreams. Okay? Goals are a mixture of both law of action and law of attraction. Okay? Dreams are just dreams. You're hoping for the best. Law of attraction on its own. There's no action there. It's just hoping that all the stars will align, everything will just miraculously fix itself, and your dreams will come true. You wish hard enough at 11:11 and bish bash bosh, new year, new me. No. That's not how it works, sadly. Like, honestly, and I'm not saying that in a condescending way. Like, I would have thought that myself before when I was in a really bad headspace. Like, I just wanted my life to get better on its own, but I didn't want to put the effort in or the work in to make it better, because I just thought, like, if I wanted it hard enough and wished for it hard enough and complained about it enough, it would just change. And it didn't, obviously, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And that's where the law of action comes in. And I think oftentimes people can be so aspirational and dream big, but not follow that with action. And in different parts of my life, I struggle with the action parts and the dreaming parts, okay? So as I said, I would have struggled with last year, maybe just hoping that my life would change on its own. Like everything would just start working for me. Like I just hoped that like all my relationships would be really good, that my relationship with myself would just miraculously heal overnight. Obviously that didn't happen on its own. I had to put in the work. I had to make that shit happen by acting on it. However, when it came to things to do with career, I was always very like driven, but my goals were always really vague. And because of that, I never felt a sense of achievement when I did attain them. And that was the most soul destroying revealing feeling that it took me a few times before acknowledging was to be the case, by the way. Like, I spent 5 years seeking top of my class grades, which I did achieve year on year. And each year I'd feel like, okay, cool, on to the next one, because they weren't intrinsically meaningful to me. It was, and this is what we're going to talk about people's perceptions of me and my intelligence levels. So especially that of like my family, say, I really, really, really wanted to prove that I was hardworking, driven. I wanted to fit this idea that other people had for me, or aspirations and ambitions that other people had for me. And there's no issue with that, okay? But I very much took that on as my own source of motivation. And because that wasn't actually my goal, wasn't my value, or wasn't necessarily aligned with the big picture for me, it was meaningless in the end. And that's what led me to kind of constantly, year on year, like so slowly but surely lose myself in my pursuit of those goals that weren't aligned with me and my values, which is what we're going to talk about soon. And it was only that realization that I wasn't fulfilled by these goals that I was achieving because they weren't intrinsically important to me. I wasn't like, it didn't make me tick. I wasn't like, okay, cool, I've like a full day of work today. Let's go. I'm so excited. That's what I'm like now, by the way. I'm such a loser. I love my work. I love it so much. Get up at 5 every morning, go for my walk, work from 6 until 8. And not necessarily a healthy lifestyle, but in the short term, sometimes that has to be the case. And that's just the phase of my life that I'm in right now. And there's no complaints. Like, I'm in the best mood ever. I'm tired, yes, but I love it. It gives me meaning and purpose and value, and it fulfills me and my wants. It's intrinsically important to me. It's my intrinsic motivation. However, in the past, when I was getting up for my studies or for my job, because there was no intrinsic motivation there for me, really, it was largely external motivation. So that of like being deemed, as I said, as intelligent or like respectable or smart or adding value, like how other people thought of me, like appraisal, essentially. That obviously wasn't going to lead to sustained fulfillment or sustained action. There was always going to become a point where I'd lead myself to burnout, because if you're constantly giving something 100% and it doesn't matter to you, like, firstly, it takes a certain breed of person to do that. Like, I know a lot of people might be like, well, I would never do that. If it didn't matter to me, I wouldn't be giving it my all. But some people might relate to this. Like, I gave it my all, even though deep down it didn't matter to me. I just wanted to prove myself. And that's when you need to take a step back. And it took me a while. Like, it's never too late to take a step back and reevaluate that for you. But it's just so important to do at some point. And there is a balance between, like I said, the law of action and the law of attraction. Because, as I said, I'd be very action oriented when it comes to things that are meaningful to me. But my law of attraction, I really do slack a little bit on. Like, I don't think too highly of myself. I actually struggle a lot with imposter syndrome. So I would never really allow myself time to be like manifesting something. Like, I just want to work towards it. I don't want to leave room for the world or the universe to make the stars align for me. And there is a balance. Like, it is actually quite good to dream big and to be like, think of the future self and say like mantras like, I am financially stable, I am living a prosperous life, all these things, whatever your I am statements are for your future self that you say in the present tense, so that if you're essentially manifesting that into reality. That's not something I do, okay? And that's something I need to start doing more of, because it actually kind of feeds into my imposter syndrome. And this is something I was talking to my friend Ashling about, who's going to be on the next podcast, was that I was feeding into my imposter syndrome, or still do, because I don't actually allow myself the moment to be like, get excited about like what I'm working towards and attracting into my life by being proactive. Like, there is a balance between being proactive and inactive, and actually just letting the stars kind of align. I know I said to not wait for them, but there's a balance to kind of let things fall into place a little bit as you take action towards achieving them. Okay, so there is a balance. It's a freaking hard one to strike a balance for, but there is, and it can be done. It's just a matter of, I guess, balancing act of the doing mode and the being mode. And that's where the likes of like mindfulness come into play, meditative practices. Like, even in my ebook for my clients, I have a couple of like gratitude practices, like all these different things, taking that time out of your day to be grateful for what you currently have, but also kind of manifest into the future what you want for you it is important, not necessarily as important as doing, okay, as being proactive. As I said, there is a balance to strike, and it is possible with the help and guidance of someone like me. But at the end of the day, I think it kind of comes back to wanting it enough. And this is what I mean about it being something that's meaningful to you, because if you don't want it enough, you're not going to make it a priority, okay? There's a difference between like dreams and priorities, because dreams sometimes are actually fueled by other people's input and not necessarily what you dream for yourself. But priorities are like, no, these are my values. Therefore, these are my priorities. These are my non-negotiables. No one and nothing is going to stand in my way in attaining them, because this is how I want to lead my life. I do not want to lead my life essentially through the eyes of others. I want it to be based around my core values, and constantly, be it incrementally or drastically, like it will depend on the phase of your life you're in, what we're talking about, level up in some regard on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis, okay? That's what makes our life meaningful. And it's been literally shown that people who have a purpose or a sense of purpose and are aligned with their values and are goal oriented and make strides towards achieving those goals are statistically happier, or at least content with their lives, than people who don't, okay? People who don't have a clear sense of their purpose, of their values, and are kind of just aimlessly strolling through life, are usually the people who struggle a lot with headspace, okay, with their mindset, with their mental health, their emotional well-being. And it's a toxic cycle that sometimes we wait till it's at like rock bottom before we take action towards improving it. And this is the message I want to send to you, is that you don't have to wait until it's literally rock bottom, like you're in the pits, and that's when you want to go into your chrysalis stage and grow into the butterfly that you're meant to be. You can make action now. You can take action today, even if you aren't in the pits, okay? You can take action no matter what stage or severity of your discontentment that you're in, or whatever it may be for you, because oftentimes people do wait until you're in rock bottom. Like I know I did, and I don't necessarily regret it, because like it's what instigated the change for me, and I think I personally needed it. But if you can get anything from this podcast, and you know you're unhappy in some aspect of your life, okay, don't wait until you have no other option but to change. If you have the energy to start making the change today, it'll be far easier to start from where you are now than rock bottom in some regards, okay? Sometimes it is easier in certain respects when it's like your whole life has to unravel for it to re-ravel into a new version of it. Re-ravel is probably not a word, but we're going to go with it. But sometimes people do think, like in my case, I think it was beneficial that my whole life unraveled, because then I was basically back to my foundations. I stripped everything back in my life back to its core. And I was like, right, what do I want to build from here? Like building blocks, career, relationships, location, lifestyle, whatever it may be. But some instances, it is easier to not wait for it to get to rock bottom. So it depends on what you're at, where you're at mentally, emotionally. As I said before, sometimes you're in a phase of disintegration. Just let yourself be and not put so much pressure on yourself. Meet yourself where you are. But this is the message I want to leave with you, is that you don't have to wait until, you know, your mental health is rock bottom, your emotional well-being is rock bottom, the relationship is so toxic that you don't even know who you are anymore. Like, you don't have to wait until you've lost yourself to make the change. And next up, let's look at motivation, okay? Because this is actually a couple of the questions that I got yesterday in where are we now? On my story. And the questions that I actually got were really fitting for the topic at hand, which is really handy, considering I'm talking about New Year's resolutions and goals, okay? And I want to preface this with, as I said, this time of year, at the beginning of this pod, I said that this time of year is a significant or notable date. So January 17th, January 19th, okay, for many reasons. One being that Monday of this week was Blue Monday, and 17th and 19th, which is the Wednesday, what day are we on now? Yeah, Wednesday and Thursday of this week of January, is generally speaking when motivation levels start to wane in people, okay? Their New Year's resolutions and their goals that they set at the start of the year or just before the new year really start to like take a backseat. Their motivation drops off and their energy levels and their ambition towards achieving them really start to plummet. And it's like a phenomenon for a reason, because it's a global thing. People start the year on a high, ready to rumble. If you're in the cusp of, if you're on the cusp of period of growth, that is, you're ready to rumble. You were literally going to hit the ground running January 1st. And it's that issue with all or nothing mindset that we always kind of come back to in this pod, that isn't sustainable, okay? And if you aren't deriving your goals or your resolutions from your values and your intrinsic motivation sources, they won't last. Okay, and that's what we're going to look at now. So one of the questions was, what is motivation really? Okay, and I thought that was a really interesting question, because I was like, oh my God, I've never really like just taken time back, apart from back in my business studies days, to think, what is motivation? Like, actually, what does that mean? Okay, because we talk about it so much, especially as PTs and coaches. We're like, don't rely on motivation, discipline, blah, blah, blah. Okay, like I know what we sound like. Okay, I'm very aware of the potential repeated nature of our content if you're viewing or following a lot of coaches, okay? I do try to steer away from adding to that samey environment, but sometimes we do have to repeat ourselves to get the message home. But it was that question, it really stumped me. I was like, what is motivation actually? Okay, and it brought me back to when I studied business. This is when business comes in handy, or studying it at least at a university level. So what is motivation? Broken down, there are two types of motivation, okay? So there is extrinsic motivation and there's intrinsic motivation, which I've talked about already. So extrinsic motivation involves doing something because you want some sort of reward or to avoid punishment. So in the context of health and fitness, okay, that might be some sort of physique goal because you want to look a certain way. Okay, but not necessarily because of how it will make you feel, okay, which is what intrinsic motivation kind of more aligns with. It's about deriving your sense of motivation from something that is truly meaningful to you internally, like not to do with anything materialistic, anything surface level, anything to do with appearance, aesthetic, whatever it may be, like social status, financial well-being, nothing like that. What fuels you? What fills you with joy? What fills your cup, essentially, okay? In the context of health and fitness, that might be, well, going to the gym and hitting a PB in resistance training makes me feel fucking class. Like the adrenaline, the endorphins I feel are like none other. And I leave feeling like $100 as opposed to that $1 that I felt going in. I don't know why I'm speaking an American language now. I leave feeling better than when I came in, okay, essentially is the moral of the story. And I thought that was just so interesting to kind of remind myself of that, because that ultimately is the first thing that we should be relying on. It is your intrinsic motivation, okay? We don't want to necessarily throw motivation out the window entirely, because it is really important. It's what aligns with your values, okay? So your like health and well-being, say, is one of your values. So you want to prioritize exercising because it has incredible mental, emotional, and physical benefits. So that's something I kind of want to go back on and retract my statement on, to say not to rely on motivation is wrong. Like, it's part of the equation. So intrinsic motivation is a very meaningful thing to have as at least a component of the equation to achieving your goals. But it's not the only one, okay? So just to go back for another example in case people need more examples. So my point of view, for example, because it's the most obviously top of mind one I can relate to or relate back to you, is my health goals, or my health goals would have shifted from when I first started the gym, which I didn't really realize I was talking about already on my page before, shifted from physique oriented to health and performance oriented. So less so about having a thigh gap, being skinny, or getting a fat ass, but that's still, not gonna lie, still an important one to me. And that's okay. You're allowed to still have physique goals. I'm human. To one of I want to feel my best from the inside out. I want to look and feel my best from the inside out. Like I empower my fellow females on the Mauve coaching team. I want to empower them to look and feel their best from the inside out, okay? That means their healthiest, fittest, and strongest selves. And that's my why. That's my why I go to the gym every week, even when I'm fucking flat out with work. I don't think twice about it because it's intrinsically motivating to me, because I know I feel freaking class when I hit a PB in the gym, when I'm eating to fuel my body, to nourish my body, to feel my best mentally and emotionally, and therefore physically, because I'm nourishing my body with good foods, whole foods. I'm not restricting. It's all to do with what I'm adding to my diet as opposed to what I'm removing from it. That's also what I'm adding to my lifestyle as opposed to what I'm removing from it, okay? I'm not fixated on never having a drink again, okay? I'm actually currently not drinking just because it makes me feel like literal shit, and it's not something I enjoy doing ever. But I'm never going to say to myself, I'm never having a drink again, because that's not the approach that firstly is sustainable, nor is that what I value. For me, it's like, how can I add to my life through these habits that I have on a daily basis? Well, I'll eat nourishing foods, I'll eat regularly, I'll eat more fiber, I'll eat more protein, carbs, fats, balanced meals, I'll train every second day in the gym, I'll level up my strength, my health, my fitness, because that's what's important to me intrinsically. And I lost that for a long time when I was younger, and I was swayed by diet culture and like the thigh gap phenomenon and that era itself. So toxic, never go back there. Another example would be my career. Okay, so like I said before, it shifted from one of being how I thought other people viewed me, like appraisal and what was deemed as successful by society, to one that was deeply meaningful to me, that I felt like I was making an impact on other people's lives. Like that was something I didn't realize was a real big source of my discontentment, my unhappiness, because I always said to myself, fuck that. I'm sorry, like if you're in corporate, no hate, okay? This isn't a dig at you. But like, I always said to myself, I was like, no, I don't want to work for the big corp. I don't, like, it's so meaningless. You're not affecting anyone directly. You're just affecting a company's bottom line. And that was just always my perception. But I just kind of did it anyway, because I was like, oh, well, this is what will be deemed successful by society. And took me hitting rock bottom last year to be like, no, I don't want to live my life like that. I want to live a meaningful life for me. I want to help people. I want to help people who've been through what I've been through, so that they either don't have to go through it at all, or that I'm there to help them on their journey to recovering from it. Okay, so that might be eating disorder related, just overall health and fitness, well-being, okay, holistic well-being. So that's my why for my career and my health and fitness. Let me ask you, what's your why? And just to go back to that, okay, you might be asking yourself, how do I like understand or figure out what my intrinsic motivation is? Or how do I cultivate it? Okay. And that's not to knock you having physique goals. If you want to achieve fat loss, healthy fat loss, okay, it's needed in the eyes of medicine. Say, for example, if you are clinically overweight and you want to achieve some degree of fat loss to feel better, okay, to live a healthier life, to feel more energized, to obviously improve your overall health, like not putting as much stress on your heart, for example. Like, there are intrinsic motivators behind achieving fat loss. It's okay if you start with the root source of your motivation as being extrinsic. It can evolve and change over time. So initially might be because, well, I'm going to exercise and eat better because I want to look like this. Along the way, realistically, your goals will evolve because you'll love how it makes you feel. You'll love how you'll feel when you leave the gym. You'll love how you'll feel after a wholesome, nutritionally dense meal, as opposed to like heavily processed foods that leave you feeling just like complete and utter shit if you eat them all the time. So that's okay. And that's not something I want to knock. I don't want you to be like, well, all my goals were kind of oriented around physique. Like, I don't want to ever come across as saying that that's not a valid or valuable goal. It's just not one that I think you will hold forever. I think naturally it will evolve. So I'd love to see if that is something that is your goal now. Let me know if that does evolve with time. Maybe this time next year we'll touch base. We'll see if you fell in love with the journey as opposed to the outcome. But ultimately, okay, another part of this equation towards achieving your goals goes beyond intrinsic motivation, okay? It goes beyond the initial extrinsic motivation. It comes down to discipline, okay? When all else fails, when your intrinsic motivation is like kind of waning because you feel like literal shit because of a long day at work. You're freaking exhausted. The last thing you want to do is go to the gym, even though you know it will make you feel better. Okay, I've had those days. And I'm not going to pretend that like I just always go because I just know I'll always feel better. Future me will be so thankful. Like, no, okay, it's not realistic. Sometimes you won't see the big picture. You won't be able to bring yourself out of that slump purely because of like how you know you'll feel. Okay, it's very easy to say that, but in reality, we are sometimes bogged down by our present moment mindset. It's like, no, I'm really comfy in my pajamas. I just want a hot chocolate and stay in bed. That's when discipline comes in. Okay, discipline just means showing the fuck up even when you're not in the mood, when you're not arsed, when your intrinsic motivation is not there anymore or temporarily dissipates. Okay, that's okay. Like all of like, I'm gonna say the lead up to Christmas time, like my motivation was gone.com. And my motivation then was rooted from intrinsic sources. Like it was about my health and performance. Like my goals shifted a long time ago. And even then I was like, fuck that. I just want to like relax. I'm tired. Like it's time to rest and digest. Can we just chill? But my discipline got me there every second day. Okay. I still got my sessions in every week. I didn't just not show up because my motivation waned. And that's why motivation isn't enough to answer inadvertently one of the questions I got yesterday on the story that I put up. Okay, that's why motivation isn't enough. That's why intrinsic motivation isn't even enough, because sometimes your energy is not going to be there, and sometimes your bad mood will cloud your judgment and you'll forget how good you feel by doing the noble thing for you, which is sometimes meal prepping for breakfast the next day or for lunch the next day. Like you'll just be like, fuck that. It's like, no, discipline. Come back to that all the time. Whenever you are in doubt, come back to discipline, okay? Come back to me telling you that future you will feel better. Yes, okay, that's your intrinsic motivation. But also that fucking hell, right? Grow up. Show up. Grow up and show up, okay? We are adults. We have to push through even when our motivation isn't there, okay? We just have to do it. Like, no excuses. Like, I'm so sick of people just saying, I don't have time. Like, I get it, okay? I do get it. I've had conversations with some clients recently about this. Like, the saying that we all have the same hours in the day is fucking toxic. I don't agree with that saying. But if it's important to you, if it's a value to you, you will make it work. Even if it's not perfect, even if it's just 1 or 2 sessions a week, okay? It's not necessarily like about perfecting it, okay? Doing it like 4 to 4 sessions this week, boom, perfect. It's like, if it's important to you, you at least do your best and endeavor to fulfill it, to work towards achieving that goal that you set out for yourself. And just to wrap up with the final question that I have time for today, which is, what are your tips to stay motivated or find it again if it's been lost? Okay, so going back to what I've just been speaking about, obviously, it's not about staying motivated always, it's about relying on your discipline. But to find it again if it's been lost is to go back to the drawing board and ask yourself, what are your values? All your goals should stem from your values, okay? Otherwise, they're meaningless, and otherwise you won't work towards achieving them because they don't matter to you. They're not your priority, okay? So go back to the drawing board. First things first, identify your values. I didn't do that until recently. I was like, who the fuck, what? Like, what are my values? And someone asked me, and I was like, I don't know. Well, that's the most important step. Ask yourself what are your values. From there, identify or remind yourself of the intrinsic motivation that would have helped you in the past, okay? So when you eat healthier, you feel better. When you plan for your meals the next day, when you know you're going to be busy, you're going to feel better because hunger won't strike when you're in a client meeting or you're out with your friends and you get hangry. Like, there's so many intrinsic motivators that we forget about by looking at it really clinically and being like, if I go to the gym, I'll achieve X, Y, and Z fat loss, okay? And that can be important too, but it's not necessarily one that will sustain your motivation. As I said, likely it will evolve as you evolve. And finally, I actually do have time for one more question. Someone asked, how long does it take to see results, okay? And this is obviously probably in the context of like training, nutrition, health and fitness. But no matter what the goal is, it's a behavioral change, okay? A behavioral change takes time. And this is why I say to my clients when they're signing up with me is that I don't accept any shorter a time frame to work with me then 12 weeks. Why? Because it's literally been proven by studies. It takes a minimum from anything as little as 21 days, which is very rare, okay, for a lot of us, up until 265 days, okay? On average, 66 days within 3 months, okay? So that's why the bare minimum time you should set yourself towards implementing a habit that's new, foreign to you, depending especially on the degree of difficulty in actually achieving it. So for me right now, hitting my protein goal isn't as hard as it would have been when I first started. So that's like something I've integrated into my lifestyle. It's non-negotiable. I always hit it now. But when I first started, that would be something I would have to have kind of a protein range for because it was quite hard. And I had to give myself that time of consistently, with some days of not hitting that goal, but consistently showing up and trying my best to achieve it in the long term. And because I gave myself, I think it was actually around the 3-month mark when I found it easy. Like I didn't think about it anymore. And people would be complaining over here about how hard it is to get their protein in. And I'm just like, no, it's not. Because if it's meaningful to you and if you take action towards achieving that behavior change, you will do it. It just takes time. So I would say give yourself at least 12 weeks, if not longer, okay, to allow for the peaks and pits of that journey, because we go through the trans-theoretical model of behavior change talks about 5 stages, okay? And it's the pre-contemplation stage, the contemplation stage, the preparation stage, the action stage, and the maintenance phase, okay? We don't always go through that in a linear manner. We sometimes regress, so it's cyclical, okay? We regress and progress. We fall off the wagon, we jump back on the wagon, okay? So allow yourself a little bit longer even than 12 weeks, I'd say, to really see through to that behavior change. And you'll be surprised that progress you can make in something as seemingly short as 12 weeks can change your life. You can change your lifestyle in as little as 12 weeks if you're consistent, if you're persistent, and if you're disciplined. Okay, that is all we have time for today. I hope that was helpful to you. And as always, if you've any topics you want me to discuss or you've any potential guests you want me to have on, just send me a DM. Okay, thanks for listening, everybody. And don't forget, if you like this podcast, please share with your friends or family, anyone that you think it will resonate with. Thanks, guys. Bye.